Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving deep into Social Security today. More specifically, we're looking at some of the arguments against it. We've got this opinion piece from the LA Times. It's called GOP and Musk Unveil a Threat to Social Security. Pretty strong title, Rita. We're going to break down the claims and look at what the facts say. Oh, and get this. We're going to be talking about comments from a sitting senator who at one point actually campaigned on getting rid of Social Security entirely. Things could get interesting.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely raises questions about the future of Social Security, especially with how these arguments are spreading online, even getting attention from people like Elon Musk.
Right. Senator Mike Lee, he's from Utah, posted this whole thread on Twitter all about criticizing Social Security. And then Elon Musk retweets it with just the comment, interesting thread. Even if he doesn't come right out and agree with Lee, that retweet coming from someone like Musk definitely gives those ideas more attention, spreads them to a much wider audience.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that what Lee is saying isn't new. He's basically saying that Social Security is just a tax plan, like it's disguised as a retirement program. He even says that the government mismanages the Social Security Trust Fund and that the people who get benefits actually end up losing money because the benefits don't keep up with inflation.
And the LA Times piece, they don't hold back. They call Lee's claims lies. They even accuse him of financial ignorance. They break it all down, point by point, explaining how Social Security was actually designed. First, they're clear that, yeah, it is paid for with taxes. But those taxes, specifically payroll taxes, the deductions from your paycheck, were always intended to pay for Social Security benefits. That was the whole idea from the beginning.
Right. And they also explain how that trust fund works. It's invested in U.S. Treasury securities, which are considered very safe. They're backed by the government. Lee suggests they should invest the money differently to get better returns. But the LA Times points out that the stock market is really unpredictable. It's risky, especially when you're talking about people's retirement money.
And here's the thing. The LA Times makes a big point that Lee ignores a huge part of Social Security. It's not just about retirement. It also provides disability benefits and survivor benefits, which means it acts as a safety net for millions of people going through tough times, not just people planning for retirement.
Exactly. Like, think about a family where the main earner suddenly dies. Social Security would help with survivor benefits. Often that includes payments for their kids until they become adults. That kind of support. It can be so important during a tragedy. If we got rid of Social Security like some people want to do, that safety net would be gone, and it would leave families in a really vulnerable position.
I think that point gets lost a lot in these political arguments. Social Security is a much bigger safety net than people realize. It's about protecting families when things go wrong, not just about adding to your retirement income.
Exactly, and that brings us back to people like Elon Musk. Even if he wasn't saying he agrees with Lee, that retweet is seen by millions of people. And a lot of them probably don't know a lot about Social Security.
It's an important question, isn't it? In a world where so much of the conversation happens on social media, how do we make sure people are getting accurate information and the tools to really think critically about these issues? It's easy to get caught up in a soundbite or a tweet, but to understand something like Social Security, you need to dig a little deeper.
It's funny you should say dig deeper. That's exactly what's missing in a lot of these online debates. People try to make really complicated things sound simple. And Social Security is definitely complicated.
Definitely. So speaking of complicated, did you know that Social Security has been controversial since the very beginning?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Back in the 1930s, when President Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act, some groups were really against it. They called it all sorts of things. A socialist scheme, a threat to individual liberty, an economic burden. Some even said it would stop people from saving money on their own.
Wow, so some of these arguments are almost 100 years old.
I know, right? But the interesting thing is that Social Security survived all of that, and now it's like a core part of American life. It shows that the program can change and adapt over time. Like, they added disability benefits in the 1950s. They realized that getting sick or injured could be just as bad financially as getting old.
And those disability benefits help millions of people today. But let's be honest, a lot of the debate around Social Security feels very political.
It does, yeah. You can see how different political beliefs shape how people feel about Social Security. People who think the government should be smaller. And that personal responsibility is really important. They tend to be more critical of the program.
So they might see it as the government doing too much, or that it discourages people from saving for retirement themselves.
Exactly. On the other hand, people who think the government should be more involved in helping people, they see Social Security as a crucial safety net, especially for the most vulnerable people in society.
So it comes down to how you view the role of government.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of how deeply people's beliefs affect their views on programs like this. And sometimes it feels like those differences make it impossible to even talk about the future of Social Security.
So how do we get past the political arguments? How do we have a real conversation about the future of Social Security?
That is the question, isn't it? I think one part of it is remembering that we're not just talking about some abstract policy. We're talking about real people's lives. Seniors who need those monthly checks to pay their bills, families who are struggling after losing a loved one, but get some relief from those survivor benefits.
You're right. It's about knowing that there's help if you need it.
Exactly. And another part of it is understanding that Social Security is complicated. It's not something you can explain in a tweet or a soundbite. You need to understand how it works, the history of it, and how it affects different groups of people.
Speaking of how it works, there's that whole debate about the Social Security Trust Fund. Some people, like Senator Lee, say it's mismanaged, that the money should be invested somewhere else for better returns.
Right, and the LA Times article addresses that directly. They explain how the trust fund is invested in U.S. Treasury securities. They may not be exciting, but they are considered very safe and reliable. And remember, we're talking about people's retirement savings here. So stability is important. The article also says that the idea of the government raiding the trust fund is a myth.
But they don't just debunk myths. They also talk about how Social Security helps the economy, especially during tough times.
Oh, absolutely. When people get their Social Security checks, they spend that money in their communities, which helps businesses and keeps the economy going. Economists call Social Security an automatic stabilizer because it puts money into the economy during recessions, times when people might not be spending as much.
It's like a built-in protection against economic shocks. But even with all the benefits, there's a lot of talk about whether Social Security can survive in the long run, especially with so many baby boomers retiring.
That's a real concern, yeah. More people are getting benefits, but the number of people working and paying into the system isn't growing as fast, and that puts pressure on the program's finances.
So, considering these changes in demographics, what are some of the options people are talking about to make sure Social Security can keep up and stay solvent for future generations? Besides just getting rid of it altogether, which some people want to do.
Well, there are a few ideas out there, each with its own pros and cons. One idea is to raise the retirement age, meaning people would have to work longer before they get full benefits.
That sounds simple enough, but I bet a lot of people wouldn't like it, especially those with physically demanding jobs or health problems that make it harder to work longer.
You're right, it's not a perfect solution for everyone. Another idea is to increase payroll taxes, those deductions that come out of your paycheck for Social Security. That would bring in more money. But it would also mean workers have to pay more.
And then there's means testing, which basically means changing benefits based on how much money someone makes or how many assets they have.
Right, so someone with a higher income might get less in benefits, and someone with a lower income might get more.
The idea is to help those who need it most.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it also raises questions about fairness and whether it might discourage people from saving for retirement on their own.
Sounds like there's no easy answer. All these options have downsides.
Definitely. That's why we need to have a real, thoughtful discussion about the future of Social Security. We need to look past the simple arguments and political slogans and have a real conversation about the trade-offs, the challenges, and the possibilities.
Well, speaking of challenges, the LA Times article also talks about how the media covers Social Security. They say the media often focuses on the financial problems and the possibility of cuts in the future, which can make people feel anxious and uncertain, especially people who depend on those benefits.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you're always hearing about how Social Security is in trouble, it's easy to start feeling like you can't count on it, even though it's helping millions of Americans right now.
It's like they say, if it bleeds, it leads. Bad news gets more attention, even if it doesn't tell the whole story.
Exactly. And that makes it harder to have a balanced conversation about Social Security. It feels like we're always in crisis mode. And that can lead to rushed decisions or policy changes that might not be good for everyone.
So how do we change that narrative? How do we move past the negativity and start talking about Social Security in a way that acknowledges the problems, but also highlights the good things about it and how important it is to so many people?
I think it starts with education. We need to explain how Social Security works, debunk myths, and show how it benefits people, families, and the economy as a whole. And we need to do it in a way that's easy to understand and interesting, not just dry policy talk.
So kind of like a public awareness campaign to demystify Social Security.
Exactly. And it's not just about educating the public. Policymakers also need to think about Social Security in the long term, to understand that it's not just a line in the budget. It's a fundamental program that gives millions of Americans a sense of security and stability.
And that security is especially important as people get closer to retirement. It must be really stressful not knowing if you'll have enough money to live on in your later years.
Absolutely. Not knowing what will happen in retirement can affect people's mental and physical health. It can lead to stress, sleep problems, even depression. And if you're always hearing about potential cuts to Social Security, it can be really scary, especially if you depend on those benefits to survive.
It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we keep saying Social Security is doomed, we might actually make it worse by undermining people's confidence and support.
That's a great point. The way we talk about Social Security matters. And it's not about being overly optimistic. It's about having an honest conversation, one that acknowledges the challenges, but also sees the strengths of the program and recognizes its potential to adapt and improve.
So we need a totally different way of thinking about Social Security.
Exactly. Instead of seeing it as a problem to be fixed, we should see it as an opportunity to create a better, more secure future for all Americans.
And that brings us to something important, the differences between generations. We've talked about how political views affect people's opinions on Social Security, but age also plays a role.
Absolutely. Studies show that younger generations, millennials and Gen Z, tend to be less sure about whether Social Security will be around for them. They've grown up hearing about the program's problems and the chance that it might not be there when they retire.
Which makes sense, right? They've got their own financial worries, student loan debt, low wages, a changing job market. It's easy to see why they might not be so optimistic about Social Security.
Yeah, and it's important to acknowledge their worries and address them with facts and solutions. We need to talk to younger people about Social Security in an open and honest way. Explain how it works, address their concerns, and explore ways to adapt the program to meet the needs of a changing workforce.
And part of that conversation needs to focus on how valuable Social Security is. Not just as a retirement program, but as a safety net for everyone. We've talked about disability and survivor benefits, but it also plays a huge role in reducing poverty, especially among seniors.
Absolutely. And when fewer seniors live in poverty, it has a ripple effect, there's less strain on other social safety net programs, and it helps boost local economies.
It's all connected. It shows that Social Security isn't just about individual benefits. It's about making society more stable and fair for everyone.
Exactly. And I think that's something younger generations can connect with. They're often passionate about social justice. Social Security isn't just about retirement. It's about fairness, equality, and creating a society where everyone has a chance to succeed, no matter how old they are or what their situation is.
It's about building a future where everyone feels secure and we all share responsibility. Which brings us back to technology. How can we use technology to make Social Security better, more efficient, easier to use, and more responsive to the needs of a changing society?
There's so much potential there. Imagine being able to access all your Social Security information online. Track your benefits. Manage your account without any hassle. Technology can simplify things, cut down on paperwork, and make the whole system work better.
That would be a huge improvement for everyone, especially people who aren't comfortable with technology or don't have easy access to it. We need to make sure any technological changes are inclusive and accessible to everyone.
Absolutely. Equity and accessibility have to be priorities when it comes to using technology for Social Security. But technology can also help address some of the program's long-term problems, like fraud, waste, and abuse.
I've definitely heard those concerns before. How can technology help with that?
Well, we can use data analytics to spot suspicious patterns and flag potential fraud. They could help make sure benefits only go to people who are eligible and protect the program's integrity.
So it's like using technology to create a smarter, more secure system.
Exactly, and that's just one example.
Okay.
We could also use technology to personalize benefits, to tailor them to people's individual needs and situations.
That's interesting. What would that look like?
Imagine a system where benefits are adjusted based on things like your career path, your health, and your life expectancy. So someone with a physically demanding job might be able to retire earlier, while someone who's expected to live longer might get adjusted payments to make sure they have enough money throughout their later years.
So it's about moving towards a more personalized approach, recognizing that everyone's different.
Exactly. But of course, personalization also brings up questions about fairness. How do we make those adjustments in a way that's equitable and doesn't create unintended consequences?
It's a complicated issue, but definitely an interesting idea to explore. And it shows that we need to be creative and innovative when we think about the future of Social Security.
Absolutely. We need to be open to new ideas, new approaches, and new ways of using technology to make the program stronger and adapt it for the 21st century.
And part of that is recognizing that Social Security isn't just a program on its own. It's part of a bigger system of social support.
Exactly. We need to think about how Social Security works with other programs, like Medicare, Medicaid, and food assistance, to make sure they're all working together to provide a safety net for people who need it.
And we also need to remember that individuals have a responsibility to plan for retirement and to save money on their own to supplement their Social Security benefits.
Absolutely. Social Security is meant to provide a base level of income in retirement, not to be the only source of support. People need to take charge of their own future, save money, and invest wisely.
And that's where financial literacy comes in. People need the knowledge and skills to manage their money well. That's essential for being prepared for retirement and making smart decisions about their finances.
Financial literacy is so important. It's about giving people the power to control their money, make good choices, and build a secure future for themselves and their families.
And it's about understanding that Social Security is part of the solution, but it's not the whole solution. We need a multi-pronged approach to retirement security, one that involves both personal responsibility and support from society.
Exactly. It's about creating a system where people are encouraged to make responsible choices, but also have a safety net if they need it. And that's where Social Security comes in. It's that basic level of support that gives millions of Americans a sense of security and stability.
Speaking of security, core, one argument against Social Security is that it discourages people from saving on their own. The idea is that if people know they'll get a check from the government when they retire, they're less likely to save for themselves.
That's a common argument. But I think it's important to look at the data. Studies have shown that Social Security actually helps people save more overall. People who pay into Social Security are also more likely to save in other ways, like through 401ks or IRAs.
So it's not an either situation. Social Security can actually encourage people to save more.
Exactly, and that's an important point to make, because it challenges the idea that Social Security is somehow against personal responsibility. In reality, it can actually support it by giving people a sense of security that allows them to focus on building their own financial future.
And speaking of building a secure future, there's a lot of talk about how innovation can help Social Security survive in the long term. We've talked about technology, but what about other new approaches, like new funding models or creative ways to address the program's financial challenges?
There are definitely some interesting ideas out there. One that's becoming more popular is the idea of a sovereign wealth fund. This would involve investing some of Social Security's extra money in a mix of assets to generate returns that could help strengthen the program's finances.
That sounds interesting. It's like what countries like Norway have done. They've successfully used sovereign wealth funds to make sure they're financially stable in the long run.
Exactly. And it could be a way to create more revenue for Social Security without relying only on payroll taxes.
Another idea I hear a lot is raising the taxable maximum for Social Security payroll taxes. Right now, there's a limit on how much of your income is taxed for Social Security. So people who earn above a certain amount stop paying into Social Security once they hit that limit. Raising that cap could bring in more money from higher earners.
That's right. And it could be a way to make the system more progressive, to make sure that the people who benefit most from a strong economy are also contributing their fair share.
But like any change to Social Security, it's important to think about the consequences, both the good and the bad.
Absolutely. Any changes to the program should be made carefully and thoughtfully. We need to make sure they're fair, sustainable, and protect the program's core mission, to provide a safety net for all Americans.
And that brings us to another important point, public engagement. If we want Social Security to stay strong and relevant for future generations, we need to involve the public in the conversation, hear their concerns, and work together to find solutions.
Public engagement is so important. Social Security affects everyone, so everyone should have a say in its future. We need to create opportunities for real dialogue, encourage people to participate, and make sure policymakers are listening to the people they represent.
It sounds like a call to action. We can't just sit around and wait for someone else to fix Social Security. We all need to be involved in making sure it has a future.
Exactly. It's time to move past the political gridlock and the arguments
Yeah.
and start working together to create a more secure and equitable future for all Americans.
It's about recognizing that Social Security is more than just a government program. It's a reflection of who we are as a society. It's about taking care of each other, making sure everyone has a chance to live with dignity and security, and building a future where we all share responsibility.
I love that. Social Security is a testament to our belief in collective action. And it's up to all of us to make sure it continues to serve its purpose for generations to come. It's kind of striking, how often we talk about Social Security just in terms of numbers. Dollars, deficits, retirement ages. We forget sometimes that those numbers represent real people, each with their own story, their own needs, their own idea of what a secure future means.
That's so true. It makes me think that maybe there isn't one right answer to these challenges with Social Security. Maybe it's about finding a balance, a mix of approaches that create a system that's both financially sound and meets the needs of the people it's supposed to help.
Right. And that's where that idea of personalization comes in again. Imagine a system that's flexible, one that recognizes that a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work for everyone.
So instead of just changing the retirement age or messing with payroll taxes, we could also look at tailoring benefits to individual situations, considering things like their work history, health, even caregiving responsibilities.
Exactly. It would take a lot of thought and planning, but it could lead to a system that's more fair and efficient, one that's better at meeting the needs of a diverse population.
Yeah, a 25-year-old starting their career today probably has different needs and expectations than someone who retired 20 years ago. The world is changing so fast, Social Security needs to change with it.
And speaking of a changing world, one of the biggest challenges for Social Security is going to be the aging population. We talked about the baby boomers retiring. But people are living longer and birth rates are going down, so that trend is going to continue.
So how do we get ready for a future with maybe fewer workers and more retirees?
Well, we have some options. One is encouraging people to work longer. People are living longer and healthier lives. Working longer is becoming more realistic. And that means more people paying into the system and fewer people taking benefits out.
I see, but that brings up concerns about age discrimination. Will older workers be able to find jobs? We need to create an environment where people who can and want to work longer have that opportunity.
You're right. It's not just about raising the retirement age. It's about valuing older workers and making sure they have a place in the workforce.
And it's also important to remember that not everyone can work longer. Some people have physically demanding jobs that wear their bodies down. Others have health problems that make it hard to keep working after a certain age. Any solutions we come up with need to be fair to everyone.
I agree completely. Fairness has to be a top priority when we make changes to Social Security.
Which brings us back to that idea of public engagement. We can't have just a handful of politicians deciding the future of Social Security. We need to hear from the people who are affected by these decisions. The workers, retirees, families, caregivers.
Exactly. Social Security affects everyone. Everyone should have a say in what happens to it. We need to talk about its future as a country, a conversation that includes people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, all generations.
A conversation based on facts, not scare tactics or political games.
Exactly. A conversation where we all agree that Social Security is important and that we need to make sure it stays strong for generations to come.
It's about understanding that Social Security is more than just a program. It reflects who we are as a nation. It shows that we believe in taking care of each other, in giving everyone a chance to live with dignity and security, and in building a future where we all share responsibility.
That's a great way to put it. Social Security shows that we believe in the power of working together, and we need to make sure it keeps working for generations to come.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Social Security. It's a complex issue, and it's always evolving. We hope you learned something new, creating food for thought, and maybe even feel a little more hopeful that we can work together to ensure a secure future for all Americans.
It's been great talking about this with you. And to our listeners, we encourage you to stay involved, stay informed, and make your voices heard. The future of Social Security is in our hands.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time.